Okay, so we can start.
Yep.
So, what attitudes towards climate change do you observe in England?
Okay, that's a very big question. Um, when you ask about attitudes, I think you have to break it down into how people feel
Mm-hmm.
emotionally and also what people think
Mm-hmm.
cognitively. I think emotionally, the majority of people are concerned or worried, and then a percentage of people are very scared and very angry and much more inclined towards activism as a result. And then there's a percentage of people who just have a kind of fantasy that it's not going to be that bad. So you have a whole range of responses to it. I don't think anyone is indifferent. I think everybody has a level of concern, but a lot of people are either don't want to think about it too much, don't want to do anything different. So they have an emotional concern, but they don't want to physically change anything.
Okay.
There is a percentage of people as well who are so overwhelmed with paying the bills and coping with life that they haven't got the space to think about climate change. On top of that, the there is a growing group of people, and I think young people have greater concern than
Okay.
older generations because they are more informed and they're also thinking about it in terms of their future. So
Mm-hmm.
there is a range of responses. I think in terms of attitude, there is a disconnect, there is a mismatch between how people think and feel, but how they're prepared to act. And often how they're prepared to act is not enough, not sufficient.
Okay. Has this somehow changed over the years?
I think it has changed. I think it changes every year. Um, I think it's constantly changing, and we would talk about this as an emergent problem because it is constantly changing. It never stays still. Every day in the news or every week in the news, we have new information about ice melting or wildfires or flooding or not knowing when spring is. We've got the blossom out too early. People are constantly observing these things, but not necessarily recognizing that it is incrementally getting worse year on year.
Mm-hmm.
2 years ago, we had 40 degrees heat, which worried people. Last summer, we had cold, wet weather. So people will be quick to be reassured by that.
Mm-hmm.
There is also misinformation and disinformation from governments and oil companies and big business that are economically driven, making decisions about economic security rather than food security or land security. So you've got competing narratives, some of which is quite criminal. If you listen to Antonio Guterres, he says it's a crime that we're not acting on this.
Mm-hmm.
So I think what it comes down to is a lot of confusion. And when people are confused, they don't know what to do.
Okay.
Yeah. I think we are seeing more and more and more people worried. So I
Mm-hmm.
think that is increasing year on year.
Okay.
We're also seeing government and legal action against protesters and activists.
Mm-hmm.
So there is a backlash against that.
Okay.
It's very, very difficult times to navigate because awareness is growing, but that leads to more pressure on people who know what's going on.
Mm.
And
Okay.
we don't have leadership. So we don't have government leadership and we don't have economic leadership.
So what can be done to mobilize the passive people? You said a little bit about confusion and the indifference. What can be done here?
Well, I think a number of things. I think the legal cases are really important. So we have the ruling from the European Court next week on April the 9th. So I don't know if you know the case, but 6 Portuguese children have sued 32 European governments, which includes your government, for failing to act on climate change in the European Court in Human Rights. Yeah. And they are ruling on it next Tuesday, the 9th of April.
Mm-hmm.
So get online and listen to the ruling. There's 3 cases being ruled on. I think the legal arguments are absolutely crucial, and we will see more and more and more legal cases now with groups of young people, groups of adults who are concerned citizens trying to get legal precedent to force people to act. Governments will be more willing to act if they're forced to.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that will force them is legal action. The other thing that will force them is political action. And, we have big elections coming up here at the end of this year, and we should only be voting for the politicians who have strong environmental policies.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a backlash around the world, in the Netherlands and in other countries, where the opposite is happening. So it's a real war between globally between people who want to take action and people who are opposing it. But I think the legal cases are crucial. I think psychology is crucial, helping people to not just deal with their feelings, but also understand how to challenge and confront denial and disavowal. Because when you understand it psychologically, then you're in a better position to challenge it. One of the things that doesn't work in challenging people is giving them facts and figures. It doesn't change the way people feel, they just ignore the information. So we need to give people data, science, facts and figures with the psychology so they know how to act on it and navigate it. So I prefer a kind of psychoeducational approach. So you educate people about mental health, you educate them about climate change, and you teach them how to develop the emotional intelligence and resilience to deal with it. Sally Weintraub talks about the culture of uncare, and we need a culture of care. We need to understand and we need intergenerational solutions, because it's often the older generations that have created the problem, but it's the younger generations like yourself that are paying the price.
Mm-hmm.
You've not caused this problem. So we need to recognize that this is an intergenerational conflict, and we should be giving children as young as 14 political votes, particularly on these issues. You should vote on this, not old people. We should be handing more power and decision making to young people, because these are decisions that need to be made for the future. So young people are more invested in thinking about those futures. It should be in schools, universities, colleges. We should be teaching it across the curriculum so that people have the education, but they also are taught how to deal with the feelings and the mental health. Mental health difficulties in young people in particular are just getting worse and worse,
Mm-hmm.
with anxiety and depression and self-harm and ADHD and all sorts of difficulties that young people are facing. And a lot of that is because of the pressure the planet is under and the lack of hope in their futures. So we need to find a way to give young people that power to construct the future for themselves that they want.
Mm-hmm.
So we should be involving them in decision making and give them power, instead of being patronizing or pathologizing them and telling them to stop worrying and go back to school, which doesn't help anybody.
Okay. Um, so would you say that the young generation is at highest risk regarding mental health problems in the context of climate change?
Yeah. Yeah,
Okay.
without question. Um, because young people in particular and children in particular don't have the power to move.
Mm-hmm.
When we feel threatened, we can either fight the threat or we want to run away from the threat. Well, you can take activism as a climate activist to try and fight the threat, but again, you've got relative little power. You can't run away from it because you're stuck where your family lives, or economically, you're stuck. So psychologically, that creates that state of trauma and terror and anxiety, but with no way of resolving it except, you know, groups like Fridays for Future, other activist groups, which give young people a space where they can at least feel they're taking some action. Psychologically, as well, young people have not developed the defenses, they're still developing. So, child, adolescent development, our brains don't stop forming until our mid 20s.
Mm.
Brain is in development right up to mid 20s. So your brain is developing, your neurological system is developing, physically you're developing. So to deal with the pressure and the multiple stressors of dealing with anxiety about climate change, from heat, from wildfires, from smoke, from flooding, those stressors impact on your mental health and your well-being and your development as a child or young person in ways they don't impact in the same way on fully grown adults,
Okay.
because the adults have had the security through childhood before they are developing,
Mm-hmm.
right? So, yeah, children are much more at risk, and physiologically, they're more at risk from heat, from smoke, from air pollution. And the physiological impact has an impact on mental health as well.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, without question, children and young people are much more at risk, much greater risk, and it has long-term impact. So, the impact of stress in childhood can create a long-term mental health impact throughout adulthood, and the stress isn't going away. The stress of climate change is not going to go away.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like having stress over an exam or, being involved in an argument with someone where you can sit the exam or end the argument and then the stress is gone. Climate stress is never going to leave because we're continuing to add to it. So this is a long-term stressor.
Okay. Um, so what are the coping strategies for the like mental health and well-being as the climate change and environmental degradation continues to surround us and will not stop surrounding us, basically?
Yeah, it won't stop. Well, you need solutions at a number of levels. They have to be political and collective and cultural first. So we need that collective cultural political shift. Then we can move to more social family shifts. Then we can move to individual. It has to be that way round. There's a lot of emphasis on individual action, but actually it needs to be collective action first. Then you need to validate how people feel. You need to tell them that you understand. You need to tell them they're not crazy, that your fears make complete sense, and you're not on your own with this. And then we need to take a range of actions, which includes physical action. So we need cleaner environments. We need better transport systems so that we can have less air pollution. We need better food quality, organic farming, organic food. Food might be more expensive, but it will be better quality. We need to reduce emissions from agriculture as well as from transport, as well as from industry,
Mm-hmm.
and get people to adapt to that and adjust to that, because actually the quality of life can be better.
Mm-hmm.
This means some people may have to pay a bit more for some food, but actually that would be affordable if we collectively took action on this to
Mhm.
make food affordable for people, and then they can make the adjustment. We need better insulated homes, we need better flood defenses, we need better land management, we need rewilding so that we need to use less pesticides so the bees are not being killed. But that's what I mean about we need to deal with it at an ecological level,
Mhm.
not just at an individual level. At an individual level, yes, you can do your recycling, you can try to live your life in that way. You can become vegan, you can stop drinking cow's milk. Yeah, these are important steps. But unless everybody's doing it, it's not going to make much difference.
Mhm. Okay. Um, so apart from the like the young generation, do
Yeah.
you observe any particular sensitivity of a specific social group or?
No, it's interesting. Um, no, I don't think it is a
Mhm.
particular social group. I think it's more um, people who are aware.
Okay.
As you wake up, you realize more and more. Um, no, I think it's as people become aware, and we talk about what woke you up. When did you wake up? Because it's almost like your awareness kind of stays quite low level, and then often there's something that wakes you up more. And it can be observing a wildfire or a flood, not even in your own country, but seeing it on the news or learning more about it in school and then realizing how it's impacting your future decision making, starting to make choices about whether or not to have children, for example. So there's often a triggering event that wakes people up. But I don't think there is a particular social group that is more or less concerned. I think demographically, the younger generations are definitely more concerned up to, late 30s. But after that, it drops in midlife and then it tends to go up again in older age. Over 60s seem to be more concerned. I think maybe at midlife, you're so busy trying to pay the rent and manage and survive and feed the kids and keep your job, and maybe you're just overwhelmed with worries, right? I don't think there's that distinctive a difference in terms of cultural difference. I think um, the differences I've seen in countries,
Mhm.
because I've been talking with young people all over the world. And actually, what is most striking is how similar people's concerns are, not how different they are.
Okay.
So young people in the UK feel very similarly to the young people in Brazil, who feel very similarly to the young people in the United States and Finland and the Maldives. They think and feel very similarly,
Okay.
even though some of them in Nigeria, the Maldives, India are on the front line of the climate crisis.
Mhm.
Maybe they have less guilt. Maybe there is a bit more guilt in Western countries where there is higher economic development. But I think when you get underneath that, when you ask how people think and feel, you see more similarities.
So, because you said that the emotions can be and the feelings of young people in different countries can be similar,
Yeah.
but what about the overall awareness of people? Because I like the actions taken in different countries differ. So does it influence the mental health and the feelings in each country, that in each country there's like a different approach of the government? And as you said about Poland, we did not have a very like good government in like this case. And
Yeah. Well, and Poland is interesting because your economic progress has been rapid in the last few years. A few years back, Poland was not economically very secure. Suddenly, Poland is much more economically secure. There's been a lot of progress. Um, I'm generalizing, I know, but people are not going to want to give up that comfort, that
Okay.
security, right? In Poland, they're not going to want to lose that.
Okay.
Um, I, and also, it requires investment in infrastructure to reduce the impact of burning coal and fuel and heating houses. You will need to heat in the winter, same as us. So the problem with government attitudes in whichever country you're in is they're going to be more interested in short term.
Mm-hmm.
So Poland government will be not that different to the UK government. In
Mm-hmm.
fact, our government may be worse than yours right now. Ours is terrible right now because they're interested in short term popularity.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
And they know if they bring in unpopular policies, they will be voted out by the public.
Mm-hmm.
So they're interested in keeping their own jobs, which is not. So they're kicking the problem down the road to the future. And the problem is, the longer we leave to act on this, the worse the action will be.
Mm-hmm.
We've known about this since well before you were born. We've known about this, the seriousness of this, since the 1950s, 1960s,
Mm-hmm.
which is when I was born. But we've failed to act on this. So the delay that has taken place means that people have a kind of, I mean, the 1970s, 1980s, I believed we would act because it was so obvious. But here we are, 40 years later, still not acting.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really hard to reconcile yourself with this and think, once you're aware of the urgency, to continue to avoid that action is really hard to understand
Mm-hmm.
because so the only way to understand it is selfishness and greed, apathy, or powerlessness because you're feeling poor or dealing with racism or dealing with homophobia, or dealing with another
Mm-hmm.
social political pressure,
Okay.
which overwhelms you. And then you feel powerless. And then you think, well, what can I do? And then you think, well, I can't cope with this week. So humanity doesn't have very good understanding of the importance of looking 20, 30 years down the road.
Okay.
Otherwise, we would have taken action. Our psychology is very stupid, if I'm honest. We deal with immediate threats, but we don't deal with long-term threats.
Mm-hmm.
And we're not as smart as we think we are. We think we're very superior, but we're really, really not. Otherwise, we would not be in this mess. We are still wired psychologically to deal with immediate threat, but not long-term threat.
Okay.
So until, you know, your government buildings are flooded, you won't act, and neither will our country. And even when they're flooded, they may not act. They'll think, oh, well, we'll do this or we'll do that. There's a lot of bargaining and not avoidance of the need to take action. And if you contrast it with COVID, for
Mm-hmm.
example, okay, no governments did brilliantly with COVID, but there was rapid action. Your country, you went into a lockdown because of COVID?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, so did we. We stopped the economic activity, we stopped traveling, we closed our borders. We were able to take action rapidly there because it was an immediate threat.
Mm-hmm.
We just need the same scale of response to the climate crisis. But
Mm-hmm.
because we don't perceive it as an immediate threat, we're not going to give that significant response. By the time we do that, it, things will not be great.
Mm-hmm.
We already have millions of people migrating
Yeah.
all over the world because of climate change.
Okay. So, um,
Sorry, talking to me can be depressing.
okay, yeah. But what you said about the indifference and things like that, and also the misinformation around it, is there any way to cope with the climate deniers and
Yeah,
people?
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Conversations like this,
Mm-hmm.
helping people. First of all, you want to try and help people understand why they're in denial.
Okay.
Yeah. Because I think behind the wall of denial, people are genuinely frightened and worried. But the denial is a defense.
Okay.
Yeah. So they're like, no, 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 it's not that bad. It's not that bad. It's a defense, right? If you get over the other side of the defense, they will say to you, yeah, it is really frightening, but I don't know what to do.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So if you can speak to the defense and help people recognize that they're defending against it because they're overwhelmed or scared or don't know what to do, and then help people take simultaneous action at a local level, small scale change, and at a national and international level, large scale change, pressure on governments, pressure on international action. Personally, I think this has to be taken out of the hands of individual governments,
Mm-hmm.
because individual governments will, all our political systems are based on popularity. So you're going to make yourself very unpopular. You're not going to do it. Um, so we need absolutely to give people the option of taking that action but not being punished for it.
Okay.
So you confront the denial, you explain the denial to people. I talk about throwing the messages over the denial wall.
Mm-hmm.
I say to people, look, I know you're scared. I know you're angry behind this. It is just denial. Let's let's deal with the denial.
Mm-hmm.
And then behind it, you've got people's concerns, which you can speak to. Then you say, okay, right, what action can we take? So if you help people understand, educate them psychologically, people will often then be able to come on board more. If you challenge denial, it'll just reinforce it and make it stronger.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So you have to be clever. You have to deceive people and get around the defenses.
So how can we support the people who are already active? Because it can be also hard to be a
Yeah,
person who is involved and is dealing with the stress that other people don't do anything.
I agree. Absolutely. So the first thing I say is, look, you have climate distress, which is motivating you to take action, but this is a sign of mental health. You're mentally healthy because you're taking action, and you're taking action because you care. So you should be proud that you care. So we have to reframe the distress so that you see the distress as a good sign, not a bad thing. Often when we're anxious or depressed, we think it's a bad thing. No, if you're anxious or depressed about the climate crisis, it's a good thing. So you reframe it and say, well done, I'm proud of you. You know, don't do it on your own. Take action collectively. You need support from other people all the time. If you try and do it on your own, you will get burnt out. You will get depressed. It will feel terrible. And you have to have faith and radical hope in the future that we are struggling with this, but you have to find a way to keep going. You need that resilience to keep going. And you need to identify the small wins as well as take action on the big ones,
Mhm.
because every small action you take counts for
Mhm.
something. It's a marathon, not a sprint. So you have to sustain yourself over the long term.
Okay.
I don't think we're going to get this changed in the next 2 weeks, because we're not. But a combination of citizen action, young people taking action, education, psychology, legal cases, these things together will make a difference.
Okay. So, do you think that like the psychological and social factors of climate change are discussed to like a good extent in your
No,
country?
nowhere
Okay.
near enough. No, no.
Okay.
They should be being discussed a lot, all the time. Because people don't understand. And if people don't understand the nature of what we're dealing with, then they won't be able to take action.
Okay.
So they need the psychological social understanding. But there's too much emphasis on the physical impact, on the impact of floods and crops and heat and the physical. And people dismiss the psychological, and they really should be paying a lot more attention to the psychological.
Okay, and the last quick question
Right.
is, are there cases when someone, for example, seeks psychological help or like a support group due to the climate change?
Yeah, quite a lot.
Okay.
Yeah. Be and people, they don't need a therapist unless they've become highly distressed. But they do need understanding, they need support, and sometimes they need somebody to help them learn how to navigate the multiple stresses.
Okay.
So I think psychological help really is of benefit there. But I work with people individually, but I also encourage people to find a group, find a community to be part of as well. So it's not just individual, because it's not just you that feels this way.
Mm-hmm.
All good people feel this way. So you need both the individual support and the collective.
Okay, so these are all of the questions.
They're very good questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much.